Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance, and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group in Minor. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now, on to the next episode.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this exciting podcast. We're talking to Joe David from the Nephos Group, which is a UK-based accounting group that has significant specialization in cryptocurrency. And it's going to be very interesting, and please listen in. So, Joe, take a second and tell us a little about your journey and what is Nephos Group and why you started it.
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me. Great to be here and great to talk again with you, Clinton. So, yeah, Nephos is a full service kind of professional services group that supports clients, founders, businesses, entrepreneurs, etc., with many different kind of elements of their professional life. So, whether that's our main vertical, I'm a qualified accountant, so our main vertical is accounting, but we also offer corporate structuring internationally. We can assist with bank account opening. We can work on corporate finance, so loans and helping with investment. And then also we're about to launch in the not too distant future a wealth management arm as well, where we can, mainly in the UK, we can support clients on managing hopefully a lot of the wealth that they've managed to generate through their business and maybe through their investments. So yeah, so we're a kind of full service professional group. And we started about 10 years ago, but about 5 years ago, we got into crypto. And yeah, now, as you say, we work with, we've probably done around 1,000 tax returns for UK investors, and we've got about 130, 140, something like that, crypto businesses on our books from an accounting perspective. And they range all over the world, from all different kind of crypto sectors.
Well, tell me about, the business accounting for crypto, at least here in the United States, is frustrating because there have, until just recently, only not been very good rules for we use the Financial Accounting Standards Board, in UK use more GAAP, but it's been very frustrating for companies to do crypto accounting. They basically treat it as an off ledger, basically investment pool, and they try to not incorporate it too much into their situation. How's it different in the UK for companies that invest with cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I think one of the differences, the UK and the rest of the world, let's say, are much more open to reality maybe of what people are doing with crypto. For example, we take crypto as payment and we then use that to make payments in some instances to certain people. So, we're not holding it as an investment particularly. We're not sitting on it to most of it's in stable coin. So in principle, there is no, capital appreciation apart from FX. So, from our side, it's very much around what are we actually doing with that crypto? Are we sitting on it for investment? There are some companies that are doing that. Or are we actually, using that as part of our business funds as if we would a bank account? So, the UK allows, I guess, and IFRS allows a more flexible approach to how to account for that crypto. And in some instances, that might be similar to cash. So whilst it might not explicitly state, it's similar to cash, and I know that most jurisdictions don't kind of classify it as cash, it does. From an IFRS perspective, you do have a bit more scope to say that it might also fall in the maybe IS2, which is stocks and things like that. So actually more of a current asset than an intangible. So yeah, there's a few more options, I guess, available to you, whereas the US, and I'm not an expert, seems to be much more closed on. It's going down the intangible route, and we've got to do impairments and things like that.
Mm-hmm. It's a challenge. It's also a challenge for companies and individuals with crypto to actually engage in transactions, because ultimately you have an on-ramp, off-ramp situation to a bank, and the banks are just terrified from an anti-money laundering point of view. I had a client, he had $5 million sitting in his Citibank account. All right, so we're not talking a small client. he transferred 1 million in cash from Coinbase to Citibank. Citibank rejected the transfer, mailed him his $5 million back in a check, which is a little scary that it went that way. But it's a standard AML thing where I'm sorry, we just don't want you anymore. No explanation provided, because Citibank has a low tolerance, and it's so laborious to open up a bank account and the KYC and everything else you have to do. That it becomes a lot of companies are scared to touch crypto in any sort of way because they don't want to jeopardize their bank arrangement. How is it different under UK regulations for you guys?
So I guess in short, the answer is no. And as you know, Clinton, I'm based in the UAE now, and it's very similar here. Whilst the UAE is a kind of crypto hub, and there's loads. I was speaking to someone literally. I just came from a meeting where they're a free zone here in the UAE, and they register over 600 or license over 600 crypto companies. In that one free zone, and there's lots of free zones here. So just that one free zone has 600 companies, and even they can't, and they're backed by the government, they're owned by the government here, and even they can't get the local banks in the UAE to accept crypto. So or crypto companies. So it's a very challenging thing around the world. The UK has the same problem. There are some UK banks that are more open to it, and if you do things in a certain way, you withdraw from Kraken's quite a friendly exchange because they have an element of their business which is FCA regulated in the UK. Some of the fintechs will say, okay, if you're only off ramping from Kraken, we'll kind of turn a blind eye, as it were. But in the main, nobody in their terms and conditions will outright say we accept crypto if they're a native kind of local bank in the UK. So yeah, it's a challenge globally. And what that ends up meaning, and it's probably the same for you guys in the US, is that they have to go to offshore banks. Offshore banks are typically more expensive. They take longer to onboard you. Transaction fees are higher. They might even be slower to make those payments. So, it becomes this vicious circle where, these and in the UAE, for example, you have to have in certain free zones, you have to deposit the share capital into the company and leave it in the company's bank account. And that typically has always had to be a local account. So now they're looking at that and saying, well, how can we possibly force a crypto company to deposit share capital into a local bank account if they can't open a local bank account? It doesn't really make sense, right? So even these kind of even these kind of, I guess, government entities or regulators or whatever, even they can't kind of get their ducks in a row. So it's a challenging space, around the world. And I'm sure you've seen in the news recently in the UK around Nigel Farage. So
yes.
the UK has a banking, I guess, problem or from an AML perspective across the board, not just crypto. So there's lots of work to be done, I think, in the banking sector.
Well, that is, my staff was trying to see if they couldn't get a hold of Nigel Farage for an interview, but I don't know if we'll have any luck on that. But the whole issue is with the anti-money laundering laws. There's also the section about combating financing of terrorism, which is good, clean money going to terrorist groups. But in the Coots situation, they've obviously this bank is redefining what constitutes terrorism into a domestic terrorist. And when you start to what is a domestic terrorist? I mean, is somebody who challenges what's the government's thinking, that, or is forcing public opinion against the government. Is that really terrorism? It's a fine line, and I think the Coots Bank aggressively interpreted that. And I think it's an open switch that I think, it's a big issue here in the U.S. as well. I mean, they've redefined parents as being terrorists at school boards. Homeschoolers are terrorists. There's this, it's very aggressive. So it's challenging for the Coots Bank. Very, very sympathetic to that whole situation.
Yeah, totally. And I think all of these organizations in the main are trying to navigate the rules. They're trying to navigate the regulators. I don't imagine for one second that Coots want to bring on these sorts of problems to themselves, or other businesses want to bring on these issues, right? They're kind of, I guess, forced down these routes by government regulators and things like that. But the issue, I definitely think, is around the politically exposed people, so the PEPs. At what point are you a PEP? That is such a broad term now that if you've shaken a prime minister's hand or a whatever once, then all of a sudden you become a pet. It's a very risky. I'm being obviously facetious, but it's a very risky space at the moment in terms of how that's looked at, and I think that is important, that we get a grip of understanding what are real risks to people, to businesses. That's what they're there to protect, right? Regulators are there to protect people and to protect their investments or their funds, and and that's what we need to be looking at, not closing down Nigel Farage's account because he said the wrong thing to the wrong person. That's not right.
That is challenging. What sort of work do you do in helping companies restructure themselves? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. So, there's a few different ways that we can do it. And typically, and I don't know if you've seen this in the news again, but in the UK, we've got financial promotion rules, which we always had in terms of traditional finance, where you have to be regulated by the FCA, which is the regulator in the UK, to promote investment schemes and things like that. But there hasn't been that same restriction for crypto, whereas as of the October the 8th, so I don't know when this will go out, but either soon or it has already come out when this goes live. But as of October the 8th, companies in the UK will have to abide by these rules. And that means that they basically have to be regulated by the FCA if they are going to promote their crypto token or project in any way to investors in the UK. Now, that obviously brings in itself some challenges. We've seen some entities, Bybit probably being the largest, that have said that they're going to pull out of the UK. They actually have their head office in the UAE, so they have less of an issue. But there are other companies that are saying to us, we can't go through this process. We're talking a 12, 18, maybe 24-month process to get registered. We're already live. We're already offering our services. How can we possibly just stop trading for 2 years and, set things up? So obviously there will be some things that, there'll be some kind of caveats, I guess, and there'll be ways that you can have these conversations. But a lot of companies then say to us, well, now we need to look at where we're structured. So, some companies are looking at Dubai because they now have a regulator here. Others are looking at, even Europe, because Europe have MiCA now. Less so, I'm going to be honest, less are looking at the US. I think you've kind of burnt that bridge a little bit over there with some of the court cases recently, and you might need a change at the helm of the SEC before anyone considers that. But so we can help with many different ways in that. Obviously there's a tax planning piece. We've got to make sure that we tax plan efficiently for the founder, for the owners. There's potential capital gains tax if they dispose of shares. Then we've also got a tax plan for the business. Is there tax that needs to be paid on the closing of that business? And then also there's the entering of a new territory. Sometimes there are things that you need to do. Maybe that's visas. In the UAE, for example, there's visas, there's licensing processes. So we kind of just help navigate that whole process and give people the information they need to help them set up in the right jurisdiction. Like I say, that can fit both personal and business.
Very good. Very good. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned that you guys are involved in wealth management. And one of the things I've learned is, as opposed to the US, if you have wealth management accounts, you have to have a wealth management advisor. You just can't, like in the US, we have our retirement accounts. A lot of they're kind of self-directed in some regards, a variety of ways of self-directed, or simply online regard. But in the US or the UK, you have to have a wealth manager assigned to that. That's part of the law.
Well, you can have what's called SIP, self-invested personal pension. So you can. So, for example, I've got one, and there are execution-only platforms that you can sign up. You create a SIP, and you can invest your money into that SIP, and that does give you the opportunity to self-serve, as it were. So there are ways to do that. Now, the challenge is not so much that the individuals themselves need the regulation or the wealth manager. It's that the wealth manager or the investment firms or the kind of the advisors themselves, they need to be regulated. And in most cases, the only way you can get access to a lot of these funds is if you go through a regulated investment firm. So it's not so much that you have to, it's more that it's actually very difficult to get access to some of these products if you don't. So the reason that we've done it and the reason that we've launched it is we want to be able to holistically help founders, businesses, entrepreneurs, etc., through their journey, and that journey quite often starts with a business, and then hopefully that business is very successful. And then you've got to plan along the way. What happens when that business is no longer in existence in a positive way? That you've sold it or that you've shut it down because you've retired. So we need to plan for that. What if you want a succession plan? What if you want to hand it down to your children? However that may be. So there's a lot of things that need to be done in terms of that planning. But also, as much as we all want to run really great, successful businesses, unfortunately, some aren't that successful, and sometimes that might be an industry that unfortunately doesn't exist, or a business that maybe didn't quite cut it, as it were. So you've got to be able to plan so that if those eventualities happen, there are things that you can do to mitigate that loss or that lack of income over a certain period. So I think wealth management is really important, and in crypto, again, the reason we got into crypto from an accounting perspective was nobody else really wanted to do it, and it's kind of the same in wealth management, and that's partly because of the FCA. They're very strict on the controls and things like that you need in place if you're operating with crypto clients. But the other thing is that the businesses themselves don't understand it. So therefore, if the IFA, independent financial advisor, doesn't understand crypto, it's very difficult for them to support crypto clients. Whereas for us, we're native crypto people ourselves, we understand it. And therefore, when we're talking to crypto founders or whatever, and we're saying, look, maybe diversify a little bit. We all saw what happened with FTX. Like, maybe put your money somewhere slightly more secure in some ways. So, they're much more willing to look at diversification, spreading their risk across different asset classes. And that's partly because they know that we're not just saying that because we hate crypto, we want them to go into traditional finance. We're saying it because it's genuinely the truth and what we believe. So, that native crypto part of it really kind of helps, if you like, the kind of the conversations that we're having with crypto founders.
Very interesting. Anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I guess be interesting as well, from our side is how Europe is developing, how the UK is developing, because for us it's the US seems like an outlier, and it seems that it's very much decided to take a I wouldn't even say compliance by aggression. It more like is a complete outright scaring everyone away type approach. So it'll be really interesting, I think, on my side to see what happens in the EU, because the EU and the UK separately now with Brexit have got such an opportunity to kind of, as a tradition, Frankfurt's a huge finance market. So is London. There's a huge opportunity for those two markets to really take this scene kind of by the scruff of the neck. But at the moment, I don't see that. I know you said I don't know if you live in Portugal, Clinton, or if you're just there, for a prolonged period. But I know you said you're in Portugal, so I don't know how you see it from a European perspective. But I feel like there's a huge opportunity, and I'm not quite sure they're grabbing it yet.
Well, I think from the US has taken a very slow approach to crypto, unfortunately. And the US is much like the UK. They have as a national goal to be financial leaders in the world. So this slow approach that the US has taken has been very inconsistent and is generating negative perceptions. I do believe with the regulations that have come out in proposed regulations under tax, and I think there's some that are coming out in SEC, where I see the US moving is to creating a regulated crypto environment. And ultimately, they do want to use DeFi. They want to do technology that takes advantage of blockchain and smart contracts. I mean, you'd be stupid not to see that. But I think what they're trying to do is chase out the unregulated space and replace it with a regulated space. And that regulated space would be a place that, all institutions and banks would feel comfortable dealing with, because they know all the coins are clean, everything's accounted for, everything's above board. They don't have to worry in that space. So how long that transition takes is going to be interesting. Now, they've tried to use court cases to chase unregulated businesses out. Some success in that area, but they've had some losses. I think they didn't pick their battles very well. And now with this first loss with XRP, Ripple, their opposition is emboldened. Coinbase is emboldened. They're all putting money down. They're all fighting SEC. They're realizing they could win in the court system. So I think, though, that where the U.S. leads, the rest of the world tends to follow from a regulatory point of view. And I think you're going to start to see other jurisdictions start to come out with, trying to define a regulated space and chasing the unregulated business out to, UAE and, places in third world countries. So I just think we're going to have a split crypto environment in the near future. We'll have a regulated space where you play in that sandbox, or you're in the unregulated sandbox, which is much bigger. And I think the big money, the institutional money, is going to prefer the regulated space. And I think when you start to see other companies in other countries wanting to invest in the U.S. And in the U.S. crypto markets because it's a regulated, safe space, I think that will be a win. I don't know how long that transition is going to take or how disorderly it might be, because that's kind of what's happening. In the meantime, UK could clearly seize that. I mean, it's kind of like a euro dollar situation, right? The US was asleep and UK capitalized on the euro dollar opportunity.
Yeah, and I think because that's what I was going to say. The risk. I don't necessarily disagree with an element of the US's approach in that they're a very strong, kind of global beast and power, right? Why would they want to have this, dirty, unregulated crypto thing? They don't need it, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't. I totally kind of get that point. I guess the issue with that is, what's the collateral damage of taking so long to get to that point? And also, as you've said, going after XRP at the moment looks like a mistake, because if they don't win the case, and I know they've lost the initial part and there's a potential appeal and things like that, but if it comes out that it's like, black and white, they've lost and Ripple have won, I think it's going to be very hard for them to prove. Pretty much any other crypto is going to be hard to prove as a security if they can't prove that Ripple is. I mean, if Ripple isn't the security, I don't know what is. So I think for me, they've either chosen they've backed the wrong horse, as it were, or they thought they could win something that they now can't win. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and that's what I guess worries me. That's the wrong word, because I'm not in the US, but from a US perspective, is what's the collateral damage of the approach that they've taken? And that's my worry, I guess, is and what happens with the change of administration. We know that there's a very big discrepancy between some of the Republican candidates and some of the Democratic candidates, and things like that. What happens? Does that change? I don't know enough about American politics. Does that change the dynamic?
I can say this about American politics, especially because I have a presidential election in about a year. It's going to be the most entertaining election season that we'll ever have seen in our lifetimes. I would not be surprised if neither Biden nor Trump show up on the ballot. I would not be, or there might be more names than we expected. I think whatever happens at the election, there's going to be controversy, and it's going to be in the courts. There'll probably be riots and protests, uprisings. It could be really bad. But that aside, when I look at cryptocurrency, I see really a blockchain technology, a distributed ledger technology, where we don't have to have one person who's in charge of the ledger. Everybody can share that. That becomes very important when we think of really a blockchain as a database. All right. And now we tend to associate value to some of those transactions, but it doesn't have to be. It's really a database. And it's a database that we all have confidence in. And reliability and uptime issues, all the great stuff. So ultimately, I think over time, databases change. I think we've had relational databases, and that's very mature technology, and data mining type of databases. But I think we're going to see shared, databases shared between companies, and they're going to be all moving to a blockchain-based approach because of the low transaction costs. And when we look at that, why are we taxing these things? This is just database transactions. It's fundamentally, they're going to have to realize that not all things blockchain are taxable. We don't tax accountants for making a ledger entry.
Too much, you'll take
why
away
should we tax
our jobs? But
other things because there's ledger entries? You see where I'm going here. This is so transformational that it's silly for certain administrators in the U.S. to try to say that no, this is bad, or they aren't really just standing up and just flat out embracing the honest truth. And that's very frustrating to the entire crypto space, and certainly disillusionating. That's a new word, disillusionating. But I think my confidence is that we are going to see, concurrent with the U.S. issuing a CBDC, blockchain becomes everything. It will become unleashed. We'll have a regulated environment. Hopefully, the U.S. financial base can recover and become a strong player in the crypto space rather than a outlier, as you described it. So
Yeah, for sure. And like I say, I think it's going to be an interesting world now, and battle between who becomes the top dog, if you like, in the space, and what areas are the go to, and I think, like everything though, what happens is the US will have some kind of regulated framework, and there'll be some crypto companies are within that. The UK will have the same. Europe will have the same, and we'll end up in a similar spot where we are now with traditional finance, where there's traditional finances companies in the US, there's traditional finance companies in the UK, in Europe, and ultimately they might have slightly different ways that they regulate these things, but ultimately we're in the same spot that they're all regulating these entities, and I think we'll end up in the same place. As you say, I don't know how long that's going to take, but we will get there at some point.
absolutely. Hey, it's a real pleasure, Joe, getting your perspective on things. And I'm really excited to hear what Nephos has done to really provide a holistic approach to businesses and business owners in terms of all their investment and financial needs. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah,
how can how can people reach you, and UK clients? How can they reach you guys?
Yeah, so for myself, I'm on many different social channels. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably the place to find me the best. As a business, we're on nephosgroup.co, and Minor Accountants, MYNA Accountants.co. And yeah, if you want to reach out to us, please do. And we'd love to talk. We love talking to people, especially in the crypto space. So yeah, do reach out.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me. You too.